Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, there's a lot of jobs where you're going in and the code is already done, unless you're working for a startup, right? And you're doing the code from scratch for them. If you make it to that point, kudos, that's hard work. But yeah, for the majority of the other jobs, it's you're working with code that's already there. And you know, it's overwhelming. It's like you're sitting there on your first day and you're looking at this massive script of JavaScript, for example, and it's like, I have no idea how this interacts with everything else in the system. I have no idea what this script does. Like, I don't know where to start. Generally, what I do is I just break it down piece by piece. Like, you know, look at the functions, the smaller functions, and see what they're doing. And then, you know, go through the script, you know, in chronological order and say, okay, what is this line doing here? And I would actually copy that script and put it into my own IDE or text editor and add comments to it as I go through it. Like, okay, line 5 is a function that is in file something else. What is that function doing? And I would write a one-line code saying, this is what this function is doing. Okay, next line, and so on, and so on. And then when you read through the comments, you can pull the story together. Like, this script does this, etc. And then there's some things like coding formats or something that may be unique to a company that you wouldn't necessarily see elsewhere, like how they name things, their naming conventions, where they put their code. And that is okay to ask questions about, like, do you have any documentation on standards that you have within the company on how you name things? What are your standards for even like where to put the files and stuff like that? Most of the time, in my case, documentation is pretty poor. So I just ask the developers, don't be afraid to do that. You know, just get some 30-minute screen time with them. You know, share your screen and say, this is how I'm interpreting what this code does. Is this correct? And, you know, they'll provide you with feedback from there. But it's definitely intimidating at first. It's sometimes a little bit overwhelming, but don't take it as, you know, don't take it personally. You can go into a company and some developers who are amazing at what they're doing, they don't know how to document or comment. And it would be difficult for anybody, regardless of experience, to onboard with that code. So if it's difficult to understand, don't take it personally. Just, you know, take a deep breath, go line by line, and then, you know, just start asking questions about your interpretation of the code.
I would add too, like, those are awesome points. And I think a big part of the process for kind of taking on this behemoth of this giant code base that you've never seen before is your onboarding process and knowing, okay, this code is this big, but my job is this big. So let's not think about this. Let's think about this. And what is the onboarding process to get that down? And that's where you can take the interview process and flip it on its head, where you're now interviewing that company. Sure, you know, you're trying to figure out if you're a good fit for them and maybe if they're a good fit for you. So asking them, what does your onboarding process look like? How long is it? How long do you anticipate I'll be in this training phase before I'm up to speed? Like, how long will it be before I can kind of jump off and really feel comfortable? And some companies might be like, we're just going to throw you in the deep end. And maybe that's how you thrive and that works for you. That's not how I thrive. So it was really important for me to find a company that was like, oh, probably about 6 months. Like, we're not worried about it. You'll have time. Like, that felt good for me, and knowing what the process was going to look like. So definitely don't wait until your first day to be surprised by what their process looks like. Definitely ask about it.
Yeah, I got a a nasty surprise my first day, or the first week, where I finally got my database hooked up and displaying, and I saw this drop down just like keep scrolling, and there's like 150 tables listed in this same database. And I was like, what? Shouldn't there be a limit? I don't know. And yeah, ditto. There were like 6 different microservices that we use, separate repos for like front end, back end. And one of the first things my boss had me do, he's very into like, oh, here's a challenge for you. And he's like, okay, so find the state machine and tell me how it works. It's like, okay, well, that sounds back end, right? So I was looking for like a day and a half in the back end, and it lives in the front end. And I was just total waste. And I didn't understand anything I was looking at. It felt like, I mean, you see it, you're like, okay, that's a class, that's an object, that's a variable. Okay. I get, all these words separately make plenty of sense. But I would say like I was super overwhelmed and afraid. And on like day 3 of that task, I had one coworker down in Costa Rica ask, how everything was going. And I was like, God, do you know anything about the state machine? And she's like, oh, nobody does. Just ask Danny. I was like, what? Like, it was just a complete, like, Danny wrote it and made it and tested it, and it works great. And he's the only one who knows how it works. And so it's like a trick. So I guess all that to say, like, just ask sooner rather than later. Your coworkers are probably going to be like, oh yeah, everybody hates that, or like that's so tricky, or it's it took me a week to get that, those kinds of things. So it's just getting over that initial like, shouldn't I know where it is, like imposter syndrome type thing. Like, man, how did I get here if I can't even find something that is being referred to by a name that appears nowhere in the code. So it's challenging, I would say. Not always. I mean, I'm sure there's places not like that, but just ask earlier rather than later, and your coworkers should be on your side for sure.
I guess in the same vein, I also want to say really great advice, everybody. But in the same vein, I wanted to say, like, you could be like the best, most genius engineer ever, but no matter whatever new role you're going into, it's always going to take time to learn the code base. Unless like we said earlier, unless you're like at a startup and you're creating everything, But most times when you are joining a company, there's already like a legacy code, there's stuff that was built by other people. And so your job is going to be learning the workflow, where documentation lies, how things work and what things mean, So no matter what, even if you're the best at your craft, like every company does things a little differently, So I think this is also touches back to, being okay with not knowing everything, Like when you get hired, they are expecting to teach you. They are expecting to invest in you, Like you're not going to be absolutely perfect and godlike right away, They are expecting you to ask questions to understand things better, So definitely don't be afraid to do that and reach out to people and see what the best way it is to learn your code base.
I'm going to add on one more thing because I think you made like a beautiful point. Think about any other job you ever had in your whole life. You didn't show up on the first day and they were like, okay, go do it. They're going to teach you how to do the job. Like you're not expected to know it all. And it would be shocking if you did. So I know it can seem super overwhelming to be like, what is this giant thing in front of me? But it will come with time. And if they have a good process and you work with good people who like communicating and you like communicating and you love asking questions and learning, you'll be fine.